So thanks again for being there. We know that you have a big gathering, big meeting on Saturday with all people coming to Geneva and for celebrating this anniversary. And I think that's a quite important event and also important to speak about that. And thanks again to be here at the Swiss Press Club for these presentations. I would like now to ask you just to sign our golden book. Just here. Yeah, in Tibetan only. That's good. We should also to thank the Tibet Bureau in Geneva for this organization. So good, thanks. And now, Mr. Büchli, I give you the floor for opening this press conference, please.
Thank you very much.
Just push the button of the microphone. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Metan. On behalf of the Tibet organizations and supporters, I like to welcome you all to this press conference and like to thank you very much for your attention to our subjects which we are going to present you about the Tibetan cause. It is a very serious situation for the Tibetans in Tibet. While the very hot zones of Syria and other Middle East countries are in the daily news because of the brutality of the ongoing conflicts, Tibet is somehow disappearing from the international news focus. Even there have been more than 150 self-immolations in the past years in Tibet, there is no outcry of protests against it in the general world news. Reporters Without Borders state that Tibet is even more difficult to entry to journalists than North Korea. So the question is arising, what the Chinese have to hide in Tibet? There was a fire in the holy Chokhang temple of Lhasa 2 weeks back, a World Heritage Site, and the Chinese authorities don't let the outside world know what was going on there. One of the biggest Buddhist study centers, Larungar, is in the state of getting destroyed by the Chinese, and the whole region is getting so restricted that we even don't get new pictures from there. At the occasion of the 10th March commemorating the 59th anniversary of Tibetan National Uprising Day against the illegal occupation of Tibet by the Chinese military on 10th March 1959, we don't want to be kept quiet by the Chinese international forces, who are more and more trying to spread their tactics throughout the world to bring down the Tibetan protests even in the democratic countries of Europe, by pressing the government bodies and the politicians who are supporting the true and just movement of the Tibet support. But as our 10th March slogan states, Europe stands with Tibet. We know the sympathy of the people behind us, because our European values are not like the Chinese Communist Party ones. One party, one man, one dictatorship. Our democratic values are human rights, freedom of speech and movement, multi-party and religious freedom. So our movement is urgently appealing to the UN Human Rights Commission 10 years after the incidents of the 2008 protests in Tibet that the human rights situation in Tibet has worsened significantly due to China's systematic suppression and violations of universal basic rights of its people. It is not a hot war going on like in Syria, but Freedom House report 2017 is ranking Tibet as among the least free countries and territories in the world above Syria. The world is witnessing a growing Chinese power aggressively trying to suppress the truth about Tibet. The Chinese leadership is more and more showing its real face of dominating, lying, undermining, influencing, censoring, ignoring our Western democratic values of an open society. The long arms of the Chinese Communist Party leaders are reaching our daily life through their soft power weapons. So just imagine how strong and bad their repressions and tightened restrictions must be for the Tibetans in their imprisoned homeland Tibet, which is locked up to the outside world. So as an effect of this, on 10th of March, one more valuable Tibetan life was lost when Tseko Tukcha has set himself on fire in Ngaba and died for his country. What a ruthless regime which is calling self-immolated Tibetans who died for freedom in Tibet and the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet terrorists, instead of addressing the underlying grievances of Tibetans. The Chinese leadership is more and more showing its real face to the whole world, which the Tibetans know since now 60 years of Chinese occupation of Tibet. And Mr. Xi's latest move towards a lifelong dictatorship of his country doesn't promise signals toward a more free and civilized future under or with the Chinese nation. The case of Tibet is urgent and dramatic. The organizations behind Europe's stance with Tibet call upon the United Nations Human Rights Council and the democratic governments to urge China to resume dialogue with representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama without any precondition, to end all its repressive policies and practices in Tibet and drive Tibetans into self-immolation protests, and to allow UN human rights mandate holders and experts to visit Tibet. Thank you so much for your attention and for your support of the Tibetan cause by taking it up in your media. Some sentence I like to add about a national campaign on the basic rights of Tibetans in Switzerland. A national campaign of 4 Tibetan organizations with the Society for Threatened People Switzerland and 2 members of the Swiss Parliamentarian Group for Tibet will be presented tomorrow morning in Bern. The national campaign, along with a petition calling upon the Swiss government to save fundamental rights of Tibetans in Switzerland and to receive His Holiness the Dalai Lama during his next visit here in Switzerland. The members of Parliament today will submit 2 postulates on Tibet in the Federal Parliament in Bern today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this introduction. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ningbu. And, okay, Mr. Yeshi in this case, and Mr. Ningbu will conclude. Yeah, please.
Tashi-Delek, and good morning to all. Mr. Metan, the director of the press club, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Nyingpo, and all the people present here. I, on behalf of Central Tibetan Administration, Himachal Pradesh, Dharamsala, India, and on my own behalf, pay my hearty greetings to you all. This year, 2018, marks the 59th anniversary of Tibetan National Uprising Day. And I'll give my personal account before I go into detail. Some 20 years ago, I was here in Geneva. I sat on a hunger strike for 26 days. Veronique was there, one of the Swiss person supporting us like anything. And that time, we had a demand asking the United Nations to put into practice what United Nations has passed 3 resolutions in 1959, 61, and 65. Those days, when I was on hunger strike, Mary Robinson, Nobel laureate, she was the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission. She came to see us twice. After that, she been to Tibet also to study the Tibet, but issue is still not resolved. After 20 years down the line, I'm again here, appealing to the world and the United Nations, same issue. When it comes to Tibet, Tibetan issue is not only an issue of Tibetan people, it's an issue of whole world. Our struggle is just, our struggle is totally based on non-violence, human rights issue, religious rights, cultural rights, like that. So it's extremely important for the world leaders to support the issue of Tibet. We are not seeking separation. We are not seeking independence. Within the framework of People's Republic of China, we are seeking a high degree of autonomy so that we can practice our language, culture, our human rights are respected, and a very rich culture which belongs to the world. His Holiness the Dalai Lama always talks about humanity first, interfaith, compassion, love, human rights, respect to each other. These all are culture which based in our culture. So this extremely important at this point of time. People see, in case of me, I'm born in exile on the roadside of Himalayas in Gangtok, Sikkim, India. In case of me, my parents came from Tibet. I have a direct link with Tibet, but I'm also a father of 3 children. In case of my children, they are not only born in exile, their parents are also born in exile. So issue is not resolved, then it's a loss to the whole world. When it comes to Tibet, it is not only an issue of 6 million Tibetans. Our language, our culture, our heritage, our everything, all these things are practiced throughout the whole Himalayan belt, right from Jammu and Kashmir in Ladakh, India, to the northeastern part of India, even in Mongolia, many parts of the world, our culture is expressed. And His Holiness is not only a leader of Tibetan people, he is a human rights champion. And his age is not on our side. He's now, when he came to India in exile, he was hardly 24. Now he is 83. So you have to, the world has a big responsibility to support the issue of Tibet. And again, human rights, rule of law, everything inside Tibet is suppressed. Our people, if you go to the Tibetan school inside Tibet, so-called Tibetan school, so-called Lhasa University, you will not see many Tibetan students studying there. You will only see Tibetan students studying in the Buddhist Study Center. You will see only Tibetan language department, Tibetan medicine department. Otherwise, most of the children studying in the Lhasa University full with Chinese people. So like that, Lhasa is our capital city, but market language of Lhasa is Chinese, first language in the school. So that's why even China claims so-called this Tibet autonomous region, they're supposed to be, full freedom, everything. If that is so, while these Tibetan people inside Tibet, they are protesting against the Chinese rule. Just now, Mr. Thomas mentioned about on 7th of this March, one self-immolation took place in Ngaba, which is the 152nd self-immolation inside Tibet. Not hurting single Chinese, just hurting yourself for the larger cause of Tibet. So if you look at the history of self-immolation, which started in 2009 till today, 152, most of them are young Tibetans, above 18, below 40. They have not heard His Holiness. They must be knowing better Chinese than Tibetan, but Tibetan-ness within them is extremely strong. That is why these self-immolation taking place without hurting Chinese and just asking for the freedom for our people. So there's a high time for the world to support the issue of Tibet. And again, in 2001, Beijing was granted the Olympic to host the 2008 Olympic. Even His Holiness also supported the Beijing's bid for Olympic with the condition if Beijing is granted Olympic, it must have a certain impact to respect the rule of law, to bring a democracy in China, to human rights law should be respected. But unfortunately, 2008 Olympic is already gone. The situation inside Tibet is still the same. That time in 2001, I was also in Moscow. I spent 24 hours in Zashin jail protesting against this Olympic, but situation is still the same. So that's why it's a high time. Again, if you look at the Tibetan plateau, it's roof of the world. This is your roof of the world. If there's a leakage, when rain comes, your house will get wet. So that is why it's a high time for the world to support the roof of the world. Tibet is also considered the third pole of the world, where South Pole and North Pole, and after that we have a highest eyes in Tibet, which gives life to thousands of people in the South Asian countries. Major rivers comes from Tibet, which is a life for the people, South Asian countries, even in China also. So that is why right now what China is doing, trying to drive out all this ecologically imbalance inside Tibet, ices are getting melted. Like that, if Tibetan plateau is not protected right now, it will have a direct impact to the millions of people in the South Asian countries. So issue is not only the issue of Tibetan people, so it's a larger, bigger issue. And when I was in school, my teachers used to tell me, there is a so-called United Nations. You have to ask, you have to request that. But when we become elder, when I was on a hunger strike, United Nations still just keep their ears closed for us. That is not fair. Then where the United Nations lies. So that's why it's a high time for the United Nations to listen to the issue of Tibetan people. It must be resolved. If UN and the world community fails to support the issue of Tibet, it's a failure of democracy, it's a failure of human rights, it's a failure of justice. So that's a high time for the United Nations to support the issue of Tibet. And again, if you look at His Holiness, his first commitment is humanity. He's not talking about Tibetan, Chinese, or American, or Swiss. He's talking humanity. We all are human beings. So humanity first, interfaith. Then as a Tibetan, his commitment towards Tibetan, like that. So his age is not on our side. It's a high time for us to get back to Tibet as soon as possible in his lifetime, so that Tibetan culture, language, everything is protected. We are not seeking separation. We definitely respect. We don't have any sort of ill feeling towards Chinese people. It's the Chinese regime, so-called Communist Party, which has to be. So what happened in 1989 Tiananmen Square? Chinese military people suppressing their own people. So what about us like that? So it's a high time for the world to put pressure on China so that issue of Tibet is resolved. And again, in here, if you take the example of Switzerland Swiss community, Swiss people had done a tremendous help and support to the Tibetan community for the last more than 4 or 5 decades. Of course, European Union, European Parliament, so many resolutions were passed. But when it comes to resolve the issue, still pending. For our side, when His Holiness seeking autonomy, and for the cabinet of Central Tibetan Administration, always ready to have a dialogue with the people of China whenever they say we are ready. But if issue is not ignored, then definitely what will happen? We have lost 152 lives in Tibet through self-immolation. So many thousands of Tibetan political prisoners are suffering inside Chinese prisons, and then people, even if a Tibetan sing a song with some sort of nationalism, is get arrested. If somebody writes in Tibetan, gets suppressed, like that. So whatever happened recent Chogyam temple, just now Mr. Thomas mentioned, I don't have to go into detail. So with this, through this press conference, I, on behalf of Tibetan people in and outside Tibet and people who love the human rights, appeal everyone to, it's a high time for the world community to support the issue of Tibet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yeshi. Now I would like to give the floor to our last speaker, Mr. Ningbu. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Push the button, yeah, please. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm very honored to wish all of you a warm greeting on behalf of the Tibetan communities in Europe and all the partner organizations. Especially my regards to the press director of the press club and members of the press club, and our keynote speaker, Minister of Finance Minister of Central Tibetan Administration, Mr. Karma Ishila, and my colleague Thomas Björkli, President of Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association, and all of you. And I like to cordially thank to all the reporters, journalists, today for your interest and interest on Tibet issue and joining us today press conference. As mentioned by the keynote speaker, Mr. Kama Ishila, on 10th March, the 59th Tibetan National Uprising Day will be commemorated in all over the world. Tibetan communities in Europe, Tibet organization and supporters send an urgent appeal to the United Nations Human Rights Council and organizing a grand rally in Geneva, commemorating the 59th anniversary of Tibetan National Uprising Day against the illegal occupation of Tibet by the Chinese military on 10th March 1959, which is also known as the darkest day in the history of Tibet. On 10th March, our rally will start from Jardin Anglais on 11 a.m. and the program ends in front of the United Nations. I like to request all the journalists and press reporters in Geneva in Switzerland to cover the commemoration of 59th Tibetan National Uprising Day under the slogan of Europe Stands with Tibet. I am sure that the newspapers and televisions will cover the whole events and gain efficient support on the Tibet issue. The case of Tibet is urgent and dramatic. For example, I'm very sad to say, yesterday on 7th March, a Tibetan man has burned himself in the Tibet and died on the spot. And he is the 52 self-simulator since 2009. Such sacrifices by the Tibetans in Tibet evidences that repression in Tibet under the Chinese rule is making lives unlivable. it needs the immediate attention from the international community. Therefore, we call upon the members of United Nations Human Rights Council to urge China to resume dialogue with representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama without any precondition, to end all its repressive policies and practices in Tibet that drive Tibetans into self-immolation protest, to urge China to allow Tibetan to use the Tibetan language in schools and facilitate Tibetan students to learn Tibetan language, to provide verifiable and genuine information on the whereabouts and well-being of Gendincho Gyima, the incarnation of the Panchen Lama, recognized by His Holiness Dalai Lama, and his family disappeared since 1995. We are earnestly urge United Nations and international community to use their good office to help protect and secure the lives of Tibetan people who are determined to sacrifice their lives for the basic human rights. United Nations' consistent support and concern is the only hope for the nationality whose identity is on the verge of the extinction from this world under the Chinese communist rule. I like to thank all the press reporters and journalists and requesting all to cover the rally of 59 Tibetan National Uprising Day on 10th March 2018 in Geneva. If you like to have more, if you'd like to have more information or like to have some interviews, we have here spokesmen of Tibetan community, representative of his Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association, Swiss Tibetan Women Association, Switzerland, Tibet Youth Association in Europe, and representative of many organizations here. So please take time and make interview with them. Thank you very much for your attention, and God bless Tibet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ningbu. Yeah, thank you for this introduction. Now I would like to open the floor to questions or discussion. Maybe I have one question from myself. What do you expect from the meeting of Saturday? How many people do you expect from which countries? Maybe to have some ideas about the dimension of the event you are organizing, and what is well, you have told yes what you are expecting in terms of human rights and so, but concretely maybe what is the goal of this meeting, because we know you are regularly organizing such meetings. And maybe third questions, what do you expect from Switzerland, as we are in Switzerland, maybe more precisely? I don't know who will start. Yes, Mr.
See, Tibetan people also are citizens of this world. Although we are stateless, we live in exile. Our people inside Tibet, they suffer like anything. And when His Holiness came to India in 1959, some 80,000 odd Tibetans came. Now we are over 150,000 throughout the world. But the main purpose of coming to exile is not to settle down here. The main purpose is to go back to Tibet. We didn't realize still today. So on 10th March, Europe stands with Tibet rally in Geneva is going to send an extremely important message to the world, plus also to the People's Republic of China. It's a high time we are reminding the world leaders, the European community, the world community, to support these Tibetan people. And also send a signal to the China. Now, China must respect rule of law. It cannot stay like this. It has to, if China really wants to become a world leader, it really wants to become a player in the world politics, then it must respect the rule of law, it must respect the human rights of Tibetan people, it must respect the human rights not only of Tibetan people, their own people also. They also suffer like us. So this through this rally, we are sending a message of unity of Tibetan. We are also sending a message of European community's support to Tibet. We are also sending a message to the world to remind the issue of Tibet. Also, very, very big message to China. It's a high time now. You shouldn't wait for His Holiness to pass away. Then it's not good. That's one thing. Okay, like that. So this is what we expect from this rally here.
Mr. Bushley, maybe?
In the name of the organization of the organizations behind the rally on Saturday, I like to tell you the figures we are expecting. We hope there will be between 3,000 to 4,000 participants from all over Europe. So. Yeah, we have quite a good hope that we reach this figure. Concrete, we will hand over a memorandum to the UN Human Rights Council today afternoon, which has all the demands, which contains all the demands which we have been talking about in the name of the organizations of the rally. And me, as a Swiss citizen, I have concrete demands and to my government, to my Swiss government. They are very close to the Chinese authorities. They made a free trade agreement a few years back, and we hope, and we are actually talking to them about that they are getting more active in setting up a dialogue between His Holiness or His Holiness representatives to the Chinese authorities. We are still waiting for concrete actions from our government, but my hope and my very concrete demand is there. And with me, all the organizations are also putting their fingers on it.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. So I would like to give the floor to Tobias because I have to leave, but I open the floor to you for questions or precisions. I don't know who would like to speak or to take the microphone. Maybe before somebody will raise a new question, I have another one. What are your ties with other human rights organizations around the world or in other countries, or because it's important to be together, to have a strong links with other. So yes, how do you organize with other human rights organizations or governments or any kind of to help to support your cause? Yeah, please.
In the organize
Don't
in the organizing body for the rally on Saturday, for example, there is the International Campaign for Tibet, which is a worldwide organization supporting the Tibet cause. But there are other international organizations for the support of Tibet, like the ITN, International Tibet Network, which is also coordinating activities for our cause.
Besides this, like international known organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they always cover the situation inside Tibet from time to time. They also comes with the different reports, which also clearly and categorically mention that the situation inside Tibet is extremely poor. Also, Reporters Without Border, Reporters Sans Frontières, also Time Now report tried to see inside Tibet. So that's why it's a high time for the world media to take note of this very issue and go into Tibet, try to get permission from so-called People's Republic of China so that they can really see the situation inside Tibet. While China says something, we also claim what our stand, but in reality, they can go as an independent journalist inside Tibet, and then they can see. And with this also, I want to add one point. See, physically, People's Republic of China presence inside Tibet, everybody knows. But if you look at the world, especially in Switzerland and Europe, you will see Chinese presence everywhere. What happened to Mercedes-Benz very recently? His Holiness Court has to be removed time and again. They sought apologies to China time and again. Why? So like that, Chinese presence everywhere. If you see the international universities, colleges, Chinese students are everywhere. We are not against Chinese students coming to the Europe to study, but they're with purpose. So many purpose. Like that, you can see Chinese presence everywhere. If His Holiness goes somewhere else, they try to put pressure to that particular country, like that. So, of course, His Holiness is a religious speaker, is a reverend leader. He's not only leader of Tibet, he's a global leader. So his leadership is not only necessary for us, for the world also, like that. So world and European community must realize Chinese presence, not only in Tibet, but also in their own surroundings. So that's why it's a high time for get yourself alert of that and then be more bold and support the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have also a question of my own. What are the actions you have been taking in the Human Rights Council, and have you been going to the UPR also, to the Universal Periodic Review, and what can be taken in these two bodies?
Central Tibetan Administration based in Dharamsala, Himachal Pradesh, India. We have 7 major departments. Department of Information and International Relations mainly take role of this. Under the department, we also have a unit called United Nations Human Rights Cell is there. Through this, they also try to promote, try to inform United Nations organizations, UNESCO, Child Rights, Human Rights Commission, various other commissions, religious commission, time and again about the situation inside Tibet. And we also have a Bureau de Tibet here, and there also we have a UN officer. Through them also we try to, what I have, as I mentioned in the beginning, when I was on hunger strike, the very purpose of sitting hunger strike, this broken chair, was to alert United Nations what happened to Tibet, like that. So that's really when we were young, I have done that, but now through different platforms, try to present the report at the Child Rights Commission, Human Rights Commission, Women's Rights Commission, whatever platform we get, we try to present our summary and report there and seek necessary action for United Nations. But unfortunately, China always play a veto power. Then we get stuck. When I got opportunity to address the UN Human Rights Commission on my 8th day of hunger strike in 1999, moment I stood, Chinese delegates said, point of order, you cannot speak. Then one other country also supported, then I was stopped. Then I cried, and then I also met. In the end, I just read my 3 minutes speech, 99, like that. So it's very difficult, very delicate. So why this United Nations was formed, the purpose, it should be served. If otherwise veto power, then where the poor country, where the people who suffer, where they will go. So like that. So it's a high time for the United Nations to awaken itself and then be a real safeguard to the human rights and democracy and child rights, cultural, whatever. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please just state your name.
Thank you. My name is Marguerite Conta. I have just a question. I would like first of all to thank you very much for this information, because I think it's not only interesting, but it reminds you of our responsibility to this kind of cause. And thank you again. My question is related to what is on the leaflet. in particular to resume dialogue with representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama without any condition. So I would like you to elaborate a bit on the situation, on the present situation of relations between China and His Holiness. Thank you.
When it comes to dialogue, right now, there's no any contact as such, officially. And early 80s, some fact-finding delegation from Dharamsala and Europe went to Tibet, Tibetan delegation. And then in 2002, the dialogue was resumed with our envoys of His Holiness Dalai Lama and the Chinese representative. Once they also met here in Switzerland also. But somehow, what we are asking for, the memorandum for the Union autonomy, in writing categorically given to the Chinese representative by the envoys of His Holiness, but after that they they always say, oh, this so-called memorandum also is a disguised independent like that. But again, our delegation also explained everything to the Chinese representative, but somehow they ignored. So that's why we are not seeking independence, we are seeking genuine autonomy. We wanted to be within the framework of People's Republic of China, within the rule of, but our human rights, our language rights, our cultural rights, our freedom, everything needs to be protected. Right now, it stands still. There's no any contact as such. Officially, no contact, but from the cabinet of Central Tibet Administration, we are always ready, whenever, wherever they call, we are ready to send our delegation. But for that to happen, China needs to be put pressure by the international organization. So right now, dialogue is not happening. So it's a sad. So we are not seeking independence, but still it's a high time for China to listen to us and to respect. And for that to happen, world leaders must support. Otherwise, Tibetan alone is extremely difficult. Of course, our cause is genuine. Our cause is just, we have been fighting for the thing last so many years. 1.2 million Tibetans lost our life. And then, of course, thousands of monasteries and institutes were destroyed. Our culture, everything is totally diminished. And after down the line, 50 years down the line, even if we get with Tibet, if our culture, language, everything is mixed up, diluted, then no point. USSR broke, many countries became independent. But some of these independent countries, they don't know their language. They still speak Russian as their mother tongue, official language. Like that, right now, at least in India, we are able to protect our culture, language, everything. So it's a high time for us to get back to Tibet, have a dialogue in His Holiness' lifetime. He will not live forever. So he is the leader. So in his lifetime, we must resolve the issue. For that, we need the support of international community.
If you have another question, just raise your hand. Yes, please. You can use the microphone in front of you.
Actually, I would like to give the space for others. If there are no questions, then I would like to raise it. Is it okay? Is it possible? Okay. Tashi Delek, I'm Diki from Tibetan resident in Geneva. I would like to congratulate all the Tibetan support groups for organizing this big event on 10th March here in Geneva after a long time. And I really also, it's very inspiring to see Tibetan community in Switzerland being more present and being more present in the UN Human Rights Council session and in doing the international advocacy while using this platform in Geneva. Because I was a spokesperson back in 2008 for International Campaign for Tibet. I was working as a UN advocacy officer, and it was still, even though we have been in exile for 50 years, we are working on international community support. The presence was very weak, even though we have Tibetan Bureau Office here, but there was China was using all the platform wherever they could to to silence Tibetan issues and other issues, human rights issue in this kind of platform. So it's very good that it's very inspiring that we are there. So I would like to congratulate to organize this event. But at the same time, Mr. Kamaishila, you mentioned that dialogue is not happening officially between Tibetan government in exile and Chinese government at the moment, which is, so I'm thinking how, like after 50 years of exile, how to do that. So what kind of innovative, measures we could play as Tibetan united in exile to put that to the next stage. That could be that's the thing that I'm contemplating now. And the question that I would like to raise is actually more local. On 10th March, we organize every year Uprising, and this time is different because there's a European, different associations, community from Europe are joining here. But what kind of strategy you put, innovative strategy you put, what kind of inputs you had by speaking to politicians, to government officials, to diplomats? Did you have contact with Chinese embassies in Geneva? Or I would like to know, did you, because it's very important to do a peaceful march here in Geneva, but I think it gives a signal, it gives an awareness that we stand here, we exist, but at the same time, it's very important for us as Tibetan civil society to work from behind, to do the strategy. So do you have other journalists, new people, more, not the same people, because right now we are the same, I see in this room, we are the same people. We have been working for last many years. Are there other people who are coming this year for 10th March so that we give larger, more concrete impact? And now we have got only 2 days. Still we have time, even though it's, still we have time, but is there any kind of developments that you had for the last few months working on this march from behind? I would like to, is there any things that have been different from March that we do every year? Like, for example, Mr. Guy Mitten, he said that, do you have links with other human rights NGOs, other, not just Tibetan coalition groups, but other NGOs linked with indigenous issues, linked with minorities issues, linked with all the other NGOs, all the other organizations in Geneva who can support our march to have that voice, to put it to the next level?
Thank you very much. Maybe just.
What's different? I would like to know this year.
Yeah, this, as you mentioned, we are organizing the every year's the 10th March and Human Rights Day demonstration in front of the United Nations, and from the Tibet office, they are trying their best to keep connection with all the NGOs, and the Tibet office is keeping contact with through the SDP. Society for Threatened People. They're regular. They're going to the site events in United Nations. On this year's, as you mentioned, all the Tibetan communities in Europe organizing this grand rally on Saturday together, as this is the 3rd time we are organizing, and we are trying our best to resolve the Tibet issue, but as Mr. Kamayishila mentioned, from our side, we are doing best, but the international community have to support us to resolve, support us significant to resolve the Tibet issue. And from our side, we are trying our best, I think. And if you need some more details, then I like to request Mr. Ngudu Dojila to explain about the connection with NGOs, what we are trying, we are trying to submit the United Nations about the Tibet issues. And I request Mr. Kamayishila to explain more details.
Digila, good to see you here again. We met in Italy some years back, and good to see young Tibetan born in exile taking the issue forward is extremely good, because we still, from this we can see there's still a hope. Younger generation had not lost their responsibility. They still see a great hope. When coming to the relationship with the different NGOs and how we're doing differently, see, CTA is an administration. We have its own rules and regulations. It has certain limitations also. It has certain approaches also. And sometimes civil society has to play a major role. So like that, His Holiness always used to say he lost his hope in the Chinese leadership, but still he has a great hope with the Chinese people. So that's why our interaction, in the end, issue must be resolved between having a dialogue with the Chinese people and the Tibetan people. They are represented and our represented. Like that, we have a China desk in the Department of Information and International Relationship, and plus there's an officer here in Zurich who take care of whole Europe, a Chinese who speaks Chinese very good. He also tries to have a communication with Chinese people, especially in US also and Australia also, like that. So we try to have our message pass across the Chinese people through these our liaison offices in the Europe, in the US, and in Australia, and from Dharamsala. That is one part of reaching Chinese communities. Through our Office of Tibet in Taiwan, through them also we try to reach as many as possible. Taiwanese also speak Chinese. They have a direct link with the mainland China. So many mainland Chinese people coming to Taiwan for work. There are many mainland Chinese people coming to Dharamsala for teaching, like that. Through them, we try to get our message passed through. That's one part. And of course, using the United Nations platform, doing different types of advocacy, presenting different views is another thing. At the same time, also my visit here, as the Tibetan community invited me to, it will send some other message also. Of course, yesterday and day before yesterday, I was in the European Union Parliament. I also met the European Commission people also, like that. So that's why we try to do as many as possible through using different platforms. And of course, but when we present such issues, it has to be, China also counter us. We also counter them. But in the end, who will be witnessing? In reality, world they must see what we say, what they claim, who has the truth. So for that to happen, we always ask international community. It's a high time to support us. That's one part. Of course, rally is extremely important. Through rally, we send message to the world. And at the same time, without rally, press conference briefing like such, UN address like many other activities are there. And of course, International Campaign for Tibet, International Tibet Network, there are many Tibet support groups throughout the world. And plus, not only Tibet support groups, but also international organizations like International Union of Socialist Youth. They also work through Tibetan NGO and try to bring issue inside, like that. So we try to use as many platforms as possible to promote and to further the issue pass across. Of course, we also try to work with our Chinese brothers and sisters in exile Some of them live in US, Australia, everywhere. We work together. We try to put forward the issue. They also have a problem. Why they left their country? They are citizens. They are in a free country. But why they left? There's no freedom. There's no democracy. They are being suppressed. That's like that. So we try to work together with many and to try to present our issue. So like that. So when time comes, and then today A, B, C, D. I cannot tell detail, but of course, when you mention about dialogue, okay. The cabinet has decided 550 policy. Okay, within this 5 year, we try to do our best to resolve the issue of Tibet and get back to Tibet, because the duration of cabinet, Kashak, is only 5 years. His Holiness always used to say, you have to hope for the best, if not, prepare for the worst. If issue is not still resolved, then where we will go? What we have done in the past 50 plus years, we have to study the past 50 years, where we went right, where we went wrong, and you have to rectify that and have a strategy. So last year we had a 550 meeting in Dharamsala. Many international leaders addressed the meeting. So many discussions were taken place, and the recommendation from that meeting was put forward to the cabinet, and we are still discussing on that. And then in the coming fiscal year, in India, the fiscal year starts from April, ends in March. So this March, I have to present my budget. In the fiscal year, we will also have like another 550 meeting for the livelihood, for culture preservation, for education of Tibetan, and also 550 meeting with Tibetan youth like you. Many youth born in exile maybe came from Tibet later, young, and then they are future of Tibet, and then how they can play a role in our struggle. How they have to not only go into the rally, but also speak their own language, practice their own culture, preserve it, promote it, then pass it on to the younger generation. So like people of me born in exile in the early 60s, then our responsibility to learn from elders, now we are passing to you. So like that, it has to go on. Of course, we must resolve the issue as soon as possible, but that one hand cannot make a clap. Chinese hand must come. So like that, and then we can make a clap. For that to happen, we will do our best. We'll seek every support. We try to meet international parliamentarians, and of course, like European Parliament, Swiss Parliament, everywhere we try to, our members of parliament from Tibetan side, they also try to have world rally and also try to speak to them and also seek support like that. So different sections, Tibetan civil society, Tibetan parliament, Tibetan government side like us, we also do from different angles. Of course, then Tibetan community living in European community, Swiss Tibetan, Australian Tibetan, Austrian Tibetan, whatever, they also have certain roles to play. They can also ask their own government here to seek support like that. So just in our side, it's a matter of time. Time will definitely come, we will get back to Tibet. But when, this is a big question. It must happen in His Holiness' lifetime. That's the only thing. Yeah.
I also would like to mention some sentence from the organizations of the rally on Saturday. As you know, there are the Swiss-Tibetan Friendship Association, the Tibetan Youth in Europe, the Women Association, the Tibetan Community in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. They're the main workers behind. Of these 4 organizations, we have one professional who is working about 60% professionally paid. All the rest is volunteer work. So naturally, it's a big limitation, because he's full-time working. I'm lucky that I finished my professional work, but still I have to work some other work. So that's only 2 examples. So we are volunteers. And actually that's, I think, all over the world. That's the issue of the Tibetan cause. Whoever is working, most of them are working in their free time. And I came to know how Ningbula was trying to mobilize all the Tibetans in Switzerland, how hard he is working to bring them out. You said not only for the rallies, but just to bring them to the rally is a big work. So actually, I think we are not perfect. Maybe the strategy is not the 100% perfect one, but we do our best, especially from the Tibetan community, from the Tibetan organizations. It's a big work they do, and I appreciate it very much.
So, thank you so much for your comments and feedbacks. I was just, I really understand what you are speaking about. It's not easy, and we are here. If you need any kind of help, we are there. We are there. And the thing is that, for example, in Geneva, there's a film festival on human rights coming from 9th March until 18th. And there's a possibility, if you know, still, I think, if we would like to speak about it, because it's all about educating, it's about having third party involved in our dialogue, in our struggle. And if we want to reach Chinese, I have been in Taiwan. I was after International Campaign for Tibet, I was in Taiwan for 2 years doing research on minority rights. It was all about peaceful conflict resolution that His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is seeking for. And so I learned Chinese, I learned Chinese culture, I appreciated the way of life. And it's all about, so that's what Chinese and Tibetans we are reaching here in exile, no? So if you want to reach Chinese students and expats community in Geneva, I mean, not far right now, just in Geneva, then we should go perhaps to the universities. It's not a lot of work for this. We can reach out students in the universities, and we can be part of the film festival for human rights. And today's Women's Day, there are lots of things happening, and Tibetan women's played a very important role for our freedom struggle. So we could be part of it. So all these things, besides doing what we have been doing, could be a value added for the coming, coming movements that we organize here. And I thank you so much, everybody, for doing what you can. We are not seeking perfections. I see the motivation. We are all there. We are all for Tibet, but there's no limit to improvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there one more question, please?
Just shortly, 1 minute, because there was some questions about advocacy and what we are doing. So I am Tenzin Yongdong. I'm the co-president of the Tibetan Youth Association in Europe. And for several years, we have been part of the Tibet Advocacy Coalition, which is a coalition amongst International Tibet Network, Students for Free Tibet, our association, and Tibet Justice Center. So we have been coming to Geneva during the Human Rights Council session thrice a year to lobby on behalf of the Tibetan issue. We meet with diplomats, with the officers, the special rapporteurs, and we have been doing this on a regular basis. So if we look at the success, I mean, there are a lot of successes to mention, but I just want to say that regarding the UPR, there has been, we saw that during the UN Human Rights Council's second cycle of UPR, there was almost a threefold increase of direct mentions of Tibet compared to the first cycle. And since the UPR is taking place this year as well, we have gathered young Tibetans from Europe, from 4 different countries, to give trainings and to be on the ground and lobby this year. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And one more question, please.
I would like talk to Tibetan language because I don't speak well English, and then they will me translate it. I'm Pema. ngemingli pema siyu ani nga pime chobeki guti.
My name is Pema and I am in the board of the Tibetan Women's Association.
Ani ngigi tanda teli yang anza pime chobeki lingui toli ya de seshe chinyi togudu.
And I would like to speak on behalf of the Tibetan Women's Association.
Penachashana ngema indesene ngazo 직동 국경업 중 목을 러리야 숨주 투dengi 펠리야 강에 침보디 중차베 주올이 니문이 주올야 봄에 야 겔랑 제브레 아니 디디전에 아니 봄에 동자 찍레망아 ingogocche lasalia ani pebre an dikap dilia gemil ngogochi ditsane nganzo pime mangbuchi de song chebre ani dikangi chimbu chebre di tenden cheni tanda ine nganzo sumbetari jungnilia takbarishi delia swiss nanglia pime ki gelangi tenden di chiguye ani tanda tari sumbetari jungnilia jugo nganzo ya Zurichlia Lengubegieu ani 대송태배 야당업 중 언니 덴술레 텐데 딩이무치기요 주ong안주 델리아 주리글리아 아니 콤드체니 겸이슝잡 동리아 친제 따딩안주 로다리시 주요 디멤베 퓨메기 인데스네 다 안주 지니바레 로구 동네 체니 Geneva Summitlia ani nganzu pönalia kange tebe tolia ani pögi tsumbapo dinde shuni nganzu Geneva Summit kuranzu tsokbatsu nyamdur cheni pümegi kalegebje dinde indesine lodarish lingubegi di kongwe tonju Geneva tonju da ani daramsane titaligungi gyabjonanche nyamru cheni nganzu dindesine di chigiyo dimembege ani pümegi lingu mangbupegiyo 지단과 부메기 데리아 링구 베디 개침부 쇼통구 카린스나 구시 벤젠루무치 다 베나차샤니 인데선 공로 주네 파 정강 주니 아니 다 데리아 정강 나리아 베나차샤나 니마 개동 숨게 쫑아 침브레 디디 인제단 단도이네 인데선 gem이 저완안에 코에지요 말 다가낭다 nganzo indesene pebegi ani tsembapo yinere ani jugo amji ajla jigdegen tando kuran yishi chudun la sungware kuran sa mima sumdong 죽게 쉽시 약숨 zonganalya ani ten스 상말로 소소 껴매비chen ani zonganalya 냐데요 디네 다시 원줄라 kuran indesene ani 베트 점바보 아니 카린선 쿠랑기 논리드 카레스는 간주 벽에디 아니 랍달 고구두스 베바졸 벽에 랍 고구두스 딘마중자 종간을 주요 다가낭다 뷰메즈 레균딘데스 지구여스 단다 아질라 디기 쿠랑기 다기 간디 망부치 슈송 망부치 송소 아니 슌게 딘데 남베기 야구시다 통구요 간주 스위스날 슈뉴저게 야구시다 난구요레 nganzu nyamru che ngune khura pheden tol kale majaba mare nganzu language jangyo dinde mare nganzu changma thanglang chen dinang gore kyanang da yine pa kan di shuju shan susu chu peche nyamru chen chale nangna ani nganzu nima chigle ya ngunne debu thengre samgudu nganzu kharichigo resna ngune dokza chikti thone chi mi changma lento bachigo yuse I know she's translated.
In 1959, 2 days after the uprising, there was also a big uprising by the Tibetan women, where 1,000 Tibetan women met in Lhasa and protested against the Chinese government. There they have experienced a lot of pain and there was lots of loss. So we from the Tibetan Women's Association, we commemorate this day every year, also in Switzerland. So this year it will take place in Zurich, where we will have a rally and a march to the Chinese consulate. Not only that, also during the Geneva summit we are present with in collaboration with the Tibet office and the Department of Information and International Relations of the Tibetan exile government. And we bring ex-political prisoners to talk there. So we are doing a lot of activities, for example, also on behalf or regarding the case of Panchen Rinpoche, who was kidnapped at the age of 6 years, and since then 8,315 days have passed. And another case is the case of Yishi children, who spent 3,623 days in jail, as well as on the language activist Dashi Wangju. So this was just an answer regarding all the activities that we have done, but also there are many activities that are done by other organizations.
Thank you very much for this information. I'd like to thank our speakers for all this information you gave us today about the situation in Tibet, about the rally on 10th of March. We would like to wish you a happy and a peaceful rally this Saturday in Geneva.
Successful.
And successful, of course, with all the
and positive
activities you are bringing to here in Geneva. Again, I'd like to thank the Tibet Bureau in Geneva, Mr. Dorjip, and you all for listening. And we can have some food at the back of the room and some drinks all together. Thank you very much.